hidden Brazilian UFO encounter exposed. The Gemus entity walked between witnesses holding a living light. They didn't see a light in the sky. They saw someone walk right through them. A tall, silent figure in a suit, carrying a glowing sphere like a weapon of science. And more than 70 people watched it happen in Brazil. What you're about to hear is the kind of story that usually gets buried under jokes, disbelief, and convenient silence. Not because it's impossible, but because it's specific. The kind of specific that makes your stomach tighten because you can picture it too clearly. This wasn't a single witness. It wasn't a shaky phone clip filmed from a car window. It wasn't a distant dot doing zigzags in the clouds. According to the account, this was a controlled moment on the ground in an open area with a corridor of people standing in two lines like an honor guard, and something walked between them like it owned the laws of physics. And the first question you should ask is not what it was. The first question is why it would let itself be seen at all. Because if this story is even partially true, then the goal wasn't secrecy. The goal was impact. The encounter is described as happening during a night gathering in a remote area in Brazil, the kind of place with wide open visibility and minimal artificial light. In the account, the organizers didn't fully explain what the group was about to witness. People were told to position themselves, to stay calm, to follow instructions. Two lines formed, leaving an aisle down the middle. Then it happened. A figure appeared near the edge of the open ground and started moving forward, straight down that aisle. Not running, not hiding, not blinking in and out like a camera glitch. Walking, but the detail that keeps repeating in every retelling is the way it walked. Witnesses describe it as sliding, like friction had been reduced or gravity had been negotiated. They said it moved smoothly, almost like it wasn't stepping the way we do, yet it still left marks on the ground afterward. And that contradiction is where this stops sounding like a campfire story and starts sounding like a technical problem. Microclimax number 1 is the object in its hands. A sphere of light, described as roughly the size of a basketball, bright enough to be unmistakable but not so bright it blew out every camera sensor. Not a flashlight beam, not a flare, a contained orb, a glowing ball with edges people could make out like it had a boundary. If you're trying to imagine it, picture this. You're standing in a line, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, and a tall figure in a suit with a hood passes within a few feet of you, holding a controlled sun in its hands. No dramatic movie soundtrack, just the sound of fabric moving and the internal panic of your brain trying to decide whether to freeze or run. And according to the account, people did freeze. Dozens of them. A full-body shutdown, the kind you don't choose. The kind your nervous system chooses for you. Now here's where the story gets stranger, because it introduces a concept that isn't common in mainstream UFO talk. The narrator calls these beings Gemus, or beings from Gemus, described as physical, three-dimensional, not higher-dimensional spirits, not interdimensional demons, not metaphysical projections. Flesh and blood, same density as us, but with higher cognitive speed and far superior technology. That claim is convenient, right? It tries to cut through the endless online arguments about interdimensional entities by saying, no, this is physical, can walk, can leave footprints, can carry equipment. But it also raises a terrifying possibility. If it's physical, then it can be here the way you're here. Not as an apparition, not as a vision, here as in present, local, embedded. Microclimax number 2 is infiltration. The account claims these Gemus beings can live among humans, operating inside institutions, science, governments, global organizations, and medical research, because they don't have the time limit that other alleged non-human groups would have in dense environments. Whether you believe that or not, you've heard the pattern before. The recurring idea that certain breakthroughs appear at suspicious moments in history, as if the human race gets handed tools right when the system is about to collapse under its own weight. And then the narrator takes a step further and makes an explosive speculation that disruptive technologies, like blockchain, could have been influenced or seeded by non-human intelligence to break centralized control systems. No proof is offered, and you should treat it as speculation. But as a storytelling move, It plants a seed in the viewer's mind. What if the future you think humans invented was partly introduced? Microclimax number 3 is what the orb allegedly was. The story calls it a magnetoid, described as a critical piece of technology, a sphere of light that can be carried by hand like a tool. The being walked down the aisle as if delivering it to a specific person at the far end, almost like a ritual handoff or a transfer of custody. And then something went wrong. The intended recipient allegedly stood up too soon, panicked, broke protocol. The being responded instantly by changing direction, turning away, and continuing without delivering the object as planned. That moment matters because it implies intent and procedure. It implies this wasn't random. It wasn't an oops we got spotted event. It was a planned interaction with rules, and humans were the unpredictable variable. Now let's get to the part people skip, because it's the part that scares them. If this happened in front of more than 70 people, why isn't it everywhere? That's the loop. That's the trap question. Because the answer might be the most uncomfortable part. Mass witnessing doesn't automatically create mass belief. People can see the same thing and still refuse to accept it, especially if accepting it would force them to rewrite their entire worldview. So here's a question for you, and I want you to answer it in the comments because your answer tells me how you think, not just what you believe. Do you believe life exists on other planets, yes or no? And what personal experience or evidence would actually change your mind? Because if your answer is yes, then the next question is, what kind of life? And if your answer is no, then the next question is, why are military pilots and radar operators reporting objects that outperform known aircraft year after year? And the story doesn't stop at a glowing sphere. It adds something even more cinematic and honestly more disturbing. The claim of physical densification, where an entity that is usually unseen or partially unseen becomes fully physical for a short time, walking in front of people in a way that looks like a person but doesn't move like one. In some UFO circles, you'll hear this described as phase shifting, as if the entity can adjust how it interacts with our matter. Again, no verified proof here, but the consistency of the theme across global lore is what keeps people obsessed. Now we go darker, because every viral abduction story has a shadow following it. If beings can operate here physically, then abduction narratives stop being fantasy and start being a terrifying logistics question. How do you take someone without leaving evidence? You don't need magic. You need control of attention, memory, and timing. Many alleged abductees report missing time, sudden paralysis, a humming vibration, a pressure in the skull, and the sense of being lifted without being touched. They describe rooms with clinical lighting, figures around them, instruments that don't look like human tools, and communication that happens without spoken language. And if you think that sounds like a dream, here's the problem. A dream doesn't leave a consistent pattern across decades, cultures, and languages. A dream doesn't produce occasional physical marks, radiation like burns, or synchronized sightings where multiple people see the same craft while one person experiences missing time. Microclimax number 4 is the implication that the public sightings are not the main event. In this narrative, the walk between witnesses is not the real mission. It's the message. It's a controlled leak, a demonstration designed to do one thing: create a group of living human anchors who can't unsee it. Because once 70 people share a moment like that, you can't fully erase it. You can only contain it, ridicule it, fragment it, turn it into entertainment so it never becomes a demand for investigation. Now let's talk about the alleged origin claim, because it's where the story goes full forbidden cosmology. The narrator states that these Gemus beings come from something called the ninth ring of the Earth system. Not a planet out there, but a massive layered structure, described like non-concentric rings, stacked and spread like a basket arrangement. And they claim what we call the universe sits inside this system, meaning our cosmology is not just wrong, but intentionally staged. That's an extraordinary claim, and it conflicts with everything modern astronomy measures. But the purpose of this part in the narrative is not to convince scientists. It's to convince you that official maps are incomplete, that what you were taught might be a simplified interface, not the full machine. Microclimax number 5 is the alleged reason these beings matter to humans right now. The story says their role is to open doors, facilitate outcomes, and quietly assist major transitions behind the scenes, especially in areas like health breakthroughs and global governance shifts. Not world domination, not invasion, but nudging the human timeline toward a specific outcome. And here's the real hook. If a non-human group can infiltrate systems, then the question becomes whether some of your biggest news stories were truly human-driven, or whether you were watching a guided script. Now I'm going to pull you into a scene, because this is where you'll know whether you're just listening, or you're feeling it. Imagine you're there. The ground is open. The night air is cold enough to sharpen every sound. The crowd is quiet in that nervous way, like everyone is pretending they're calm because they don't want to be the first person to panic. Two lines of people form a corridor. Your phone is in your hand, but you're already realizing something. If it really happens, you might not film it. Not because you don't want to, but because your brain might shut down. Because seeing something truly impossible doesn't feel like curiosity. It feels like danger. And then you hear fabric. A heavy suit moving. A soft scrape like boots, but not quite. You see a tall figure, hooded, face hidden, walking as if the air itself is assisting it. And in its hands is a sphere of light that doesn't flicker like electronics. It breathes, pulses. It looks alive. Your first instinct is to shine a light at its face. Your second instinct is to remember every warning you've ever heard about not provoking unknown forces. Your third instinct is to do nothing because your muscles won't cooperate. Passes you, and you realize something you'll never forget. It didn't care if you saw it. That's the part that keeps people awake. Not the UFO in the sky, not the theory, the attitude. If you're wondering why the narrative emphasizes ethics and claims that truly higher beings wouldn't engage in manipulation, that's part of an internal belief system. That evolved entities are neutral, calm, nonviolent. The story rejects the idea of evil interdimensional reptilians controlling everything and replaces it with a more bureaucratic kind of fear. Physical, advanced groups with agendas, limits, and procedures. Not demons, not gods, operators. Now let's add one more layer because you asked for abductions, and this is where the Gemus mythos collides with the global abduction archive. If a group can operate physically here, then a staged public appearance could be the cover for private operations. While a crowd looks at the spectacle, someone elsewhere experiences a silent extraction. While social media argues about whether footage is fake, a real person wakes up with missing time and a mark they can't explain. There are alleged cases where witnesses report a bright silent light outside the home, a sudden heaviness in the body, and then waking up at an odd angle in bed, as if they were placed there. Some report smelling something metallic. Others report hearing a high tone. Some report seeing a figure at the foot of the bed that feels more like a presence than a body. And here's the most disturbing element. The idea that the entities can communicate in compressed concepts, not words. A full message delivered in a second, like a data packet. People interpret it as telepathy, but it could also be a technology targeting the brain. If you're still with me, here's the reason the story performs so well with American audiences. It hits the same nerve as the best declassified military narratives. It feels like a leak from an inner circle. It feels like you weren't supposed to hear it. So let's cut through the fog and ask the grounded question. If you had 70 witnesses, what would you need to turn this into evidence? You'd need original files, metadata, chain of custody, multiple angles, independent witnesses not affiliated with the group, site investigation, soil samples from the footprints, and consistent testimony over time. Without that, it stays in the gray zone, powerful, viral, and proven. But the gray zone is exactly where UFO culture lives, because the gray zone is where the mind obsesses. And that may be the point, because the most effective form of control is not telling you what to believe. It's making sure you can never fully know. Now we're at the climax. If the being walked between those lines holding a contained orb of light, and if it left footprints that didn't match normal walking patterns, then you have a physical event with physical traces. A physical event means it could happen again. And if it could happen again, then the real question becomes, why hasn't a mainstream investigative team been allowed to document one under controlled conditions? Because either it's not real, or the conditions are controlled by someone else. And that brings us to the final, dangerous thought. What if disclosure isn't a government press conference? What if disclosure is a sequence of staged moments, carefully rationed, designed to wake up just enough people without triggering mass panic? A figure in a suit, a glowing sphere, 70 witnesses frozen in place. Not an invasion, a demonstration. If you want more cases like this, subscribe now, because the next video goes even deeper into Brazil's most disturbing abduction reports and the alleged technology's witnesses described in detail. And answer this in the comments so I can pin the strongest responses. Do you believe life exists on other planets? And if yes, do you think it's already operating here on Earth?